right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I am Sarah Gardam. I'm the outreach coordinator at Skagit Land Trust, and we are very, very lucky to have Martha Jordan here tonight. I'll introduce her in a minute. We'll get started in just a minute, but I just wanted to welcome everybody. And the lands conserved and protected by Skagit Land Trust have been inhabited and stewarded by Indigenous people since time immemorial, and that is important to remember, especially as we talk about Barney Lake wetland, which has special significance for the Upper Skagit people. And we are grateful for their ongoing protection and stewardship of the lands and waters around us. A little bit about Skagit Land Trust. We are an accredited nonprofit land trust started in 1992 by 3 founders and 32 charter members who saw the value of protecting the Skagit. And our mission is to conserve wildlife habitat, wetlands, agricultural and forest lands, scenic open space, and shorelines for the benefit of our community and as a legacy for future generations of people and wildlife. And to date, we have helped protect over 11,500 acres here in the Skagit. Here in this picture, you see a bunch of kids out playing at one of our conservation areas, and they're part of our Colshan Creek program. And without further ado, I will introduce Martha Jordan. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Wildlife Science from Oregon State University. She has worked both in marine and terrestrial environments throughout Washington and parts of Alaska. And here's where her swan story begins. In the late 70s, while volunteering to observe snow geese and reading their collars in the Skagit Valley, Martha began to look at a small group of trumpeter swans in the same area. By 1984, she had expanded her survey efforts to all of Western Washington and had contributed much information to both state and federal agencies about the status of trumpeter swans in Washington. So she actually wrote the state's first trumpeter swan management plan in 1985. So we have the OG, the original person here, the swan lady, and we're very grateful she took the time to do this with us. She's still active in both field work and education related to both trumpeter and tundra swans throughout the region. And she's currently the executive director of Northwest Swan Conservation Association, a regional nonprofit. And the focus of that organization is on our native swans and their habitats throughout the Northwest region. So right before we let you all into the call, she had been answering emergency phone calls about injured swans, and she's probably got to hop in the car after we're done here to go rescue one. So she's very much on the ground as well as a researcher. All right, I think that is all I have. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Martha and let her get started. So I will stop sharing my screen, and Martha, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, so a call came in about 5 minutes before I was supposed to meet with all of you about an injured swan out near Snohomish. So there's a gang of people out there trying to catch it. In any event, I'm going to talk about the white birds of winter, swans and snow geese, and my emphasis will be kind of on the Skagit, but giving you a sense of where the Skagit fits into the rest of Washington for swans and for snow geese. I want to thank Kyle Spreggins, who's our Department of Fish and Wildlife Waterfowl Section Manager. He is actually a very strong partner in a lot of what I do with waterfowl in Washington, because I also sit on the department's Waterfowl and Citizens Advisory Committee, which is a great group of people. Mostly they're waterfowl hunters. So Skagit winter visitors, we have swans, trumpeter and tundra and snow geese. And I'm not sure, can you see my white pointer or not?
I can, yeah.
Okay, so we have trumpeter, tundra, snow geese, and right here in the middle, we have a Buick form of the tundra swan. Here's a tundra swan over here, a trumpeter swan here, tundra here, and a juvenile snow geese, just to give you kind of a size differential for you guys out in the field. So we have 3 species of swans in North America. 2 are indigenous and 1 is introduced and, at least in this state, a problem. So the trumpeter swan is the largest waterfowl in the world, weighs between 25 and 35 pounds, wingspan of 7 to 9 feet, all black bill, red line on the mandible, and it's basically most of the swans in the Skagit are trumpeter swans at this point in time. The tundra swan is our other native swan. It's much smaller, 15 to 20 pounds. It has a smaller dish face here. You can go online to our website and you can find a downloadable ID brochure that we have put out, along with some other things, including a video that I have made of trumpeter tundra swan identification. And then we have the mute swan, which is native to Europe and Asia. It has an orange bill and a black knob at the base. They are about the size of a trumpeter swan, but they are highly aggressive in the breeding season and will kill a lot of our native ducks and geese. They can get their bills on them. They're got an invasive population back east that they're trying to do some control on. Here in the state of Washington, the mute swan is declared deleterious, meaning you cannot sell, possess, breed, import, or in any way be associated with mute swans. And just this year, the state of California has open season on mute swans because they have a population that is pretty big, and they want to control it before it gets out of hand, and we end up with an invasive species that damages a lot of our wetlands for all of our native species. So this is a photograph taken in the Skagit by a photographer who thought he was taking a picture of a family of swans. And up here you have the 2 adult trumpeters, and down here 3 juvenile trumpeters. And right in here you have a tundra swan. So that just gives you an idea of size differential. I do not expect people to ID swans while they're flying unless they can hear them or they see the juvenile color. So swans in Alaska is where we have our breeding trumpeter and our tundra swans all breed in the Alaska area. And on the left side, it shows you in yellow where our trumpeter swans breed and where the tundra swans also breed that are in the Pacific Coast population. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Our tundra swans really come from the base of the Aleutian chain in the Salmon Bay area. And most of our tundras that come into Western Washington, that's where they're coming from. So Eastern Washington tundra swans are a little bit different, but we'll talk, that's for another discussion. So tundra swans, these are just looking at the different amount of yellow that can be on the bill of tundras and 2 juvenile tundras in the later part of the season. Again, it shows you the tundra swans at this time of year are almost all white, but here they are in December, light bright gray. Yellow is starting to come in on the juveniles, and then here's a big male. Here's another one just showing you the wide variety, but that real strong U shape here on the forehead. So tundra swan migration is quite interesting, and they did some studies by putting a bunch of satellite transmitters on swans a number of years ago, and here's what they came up with. So on the North Slope, all of these swans in the North Slope of Alaska are the Atlantic population, and they all fly to the East Coast because tundra swans are divided into 2 populations, the Pacific Coast population, or the Pacific Flyway population, more to the point, and the Atlantic Flyway. All the rest of the swans breeding in Alaska fly to different places, mostly to California, some to Oregon, and some to Western Washington. This is our Western Washington swans we're talking about. Here's the Yukon Delta. All those birds go to California. We are Salmon Bay, and they sometimes fly all the way over here and then they loop back. Some of them fly directly, and a few of them fly directly over the Gulf of Alaska. So where do our tundra swans go? They come down through Western Washington. This is where they primarily winter, in the pinkish area. And then they really winter primarily down here by the Columbia River. And then they go back up north through the same route they came down, but some of them go all the way east and come up and they split and they go into Idaho, or they split and they come up and they come into this wonderful place by Usk and Kusik, north of Newport, to Kalispell Lake. And if you haven't been to Kalispell Lake in the spring migration, it is spectacular for hundreds of thousands of ducks and geese, but more than 10,000, 15,000 tundra swans, and in the last few years, a few hundred trumpeter swans. So Alaska breeding grounds are out there on the Yukon Delta here. This is a molting flock. They nest in the tundra and they lay an egg every other day, and they hatch in about 90 days, or that may more like about 95 days. And then they produce cygnets, and they fledge at about 90 days, which is why tundra swans can breed all the way up on the North Slope. Trumpeter swans cannot do that because there aren't enough ice-free days north of where they currently breed, which is about halfway up Alaska. They need a much longer period to get their cygnets to flight age. So here's some typical behaviors of tundra swans. They tend to stick their necks out and talk to each other with that hooda-loop call. And here they are just having some juveniles and adults. So trumpeter swans, the adults are all white. They have an all black bill. The eye is not distinct from the bill, and they have black feet. The juveniles are the dark sooty gray, even into the late or the early spring. And their legs are definitely not black. Tundra swan legs on the juveniles will turn all black by the end of December. Trumpeter swans will get mottled like this, more yellow, orange, and stay that way for a few years. They'll get more and more black as the years go by, and by year 3, 4, they are all black, but they will still have mottling on them. So we can age swans up till they're about 3 years of age, and they have this dark sooty plumage, black at the base, black at the tip, and pink in the middle. So we have these populations of trumpeter swans in North America. So we have the Pacific Coast population, which is where we are. They breed in Alaska and in Western British Columbia and Western Yukon. And we have the Rocky Mountain population, which breeds in Eastern BC, and a lot in the Yellowstone area, the Rocky Mountain population, Red Rock Lakes, these kinds of areas. And in Eastern Washington, these are in the Rocky Mountain population. They breed in Alberta, at least most of our birds do breed in Alberta. And then we have the interior population, which a lot of people hear about, the miracle comeback of the trumpeter swan. Well, I want you to understand that the interior population, there were no trumpeter swans. They had been extirpated, and they were brought back by Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ohio, with getting birds in from Alaska and from zoos and private breeders over the decades. I sent more than 70 birds to Iowa for the restoration program in the 90s and the early 2000s. And this is a completely restored population. Their management, their needs, the concerns are completely different than the Rocky Mountain population, and then completely different from the Pacific Coast population. So what you hear in the news about the massive comeback of the swans, this is all artificial bringing them back, and it's great. It's a big success story. I participated in it for a long time. We had 3,000 trumpeter swans left in Alaska, and they have found their way back on their own because we conserved habitats. So that's a bit different than some of the other stories you may hear. So our Washington trumpeter is divided by the Cascade Range. We have the Rocky Mountain population on the eastern side, the Pacific Coast on the western side. But right here at I-90 and right here at SR-20, we have swans going back and forth across the pass on a somewhat regular basis, not many, but some do. And I put in yellow where we have the main wintering grounds of our trumpeters in Western Washington, all the way out to the Macaw Reservation, Squim, all of these wetlands out here on the outer coast, the Quinault. But it is the Skagit, Whatcom County, and to a lesser extent down in here, but the Skagit still has the largest concentration of wintering trumpeters anywhere in North America. And then I have put on in pink dots where we have trumpeter swans wintering, and now more and more are coming in, especially around the Turnbull area, Turnbull Refuge, and through here, but we'll talk about that a little more. So Minto Flats is where the trumpeters breed, and this is what Minto looks like. It's a far cry from the tundra. It is a massive hundreds and hundreds of square miles of forested wetlands. And that's where the vast majority, it's about 35 miles west of Fairbanks, Alaska, as the bird flies. And it's about a 5-hour drive to the one place you can get to if you take a car. There are no roads or any people living out here. So trumpeter swans nest in the wetlands, muskrat houses, beaver lodges, they can do that, but mostly it's the muskrats or other kind of tufted islands and things of that sort that they will make use of. And they make massive nests, 6 feet across, sometimes 3-4 feet high. As you can see, they're big. And they will nest in the same location year after year. They lay an egg every other day. It takes 35 days for them to hatch out. They look like these cute little guys with pink legs and very pale gray bodies, but they're almost white when they hatch, and then they turn a darker gray as they age. The coloration of the head and neck with this iron staining, which you'll see in snow geese as well, is the result of them feeding in the wetlands that have a high iron content. So we don't have the results yet from the midwinter swan survey. I'm sort of expecting it to be maybe a few more than we had last year, because I know for sure there's got to be more juveniles, because that's basically huge percentage of juveniles in all the flocks that I counted. One flock, I counted 40% juveniles. And I was just stunned, because normally it's only 18% or 15%. So it'll be interesting to find out what we actually had. So last year we had almost 14,000 swans in the 4-county area. Most of those obviously are going to be in the Skagit. Of that, about 11,000 were trumpeters, a few hundred were tundras, and the juvenile ratio was 14.8%. So I'm really looking forward to what we're going to see this year. We do have a declining number of swans that have come in because in 2022, we had almost 20,000, most of those in the Skagit. But the birds have moved out into other areas like Snohomish, King County, stayed up in Whatcom. So there's been a lot of shifts and changes. So the Skagit Valley is still critical for trumpeter swans. And they came in because of the dairy farms, corn and silage pasture grass. So when I refer to pasture grass, it's really grass that's grown to make silage for the for the cows, and it has a higher protein content than just regular grass grown for beef cattle. Potatoes, a big one for swans to come in. Pumpkins, another one. Back in the early days, there used to be carrots for the Campbell soup trade, and the swans really love these giant carrots. But the carrots are all gone, the peas are all gone, crops are shifting all the time. And we used to have about 40 dairy farms in the Skagit. We are down to five, and I think one more is leaving. So the birds came in because there was dairy. They wanted the corn and they wanted that pasture grass. We didn't have the potatoes back then. So dairy farms are critical for swans everywhere in Washington, including Eastern Washington. Swans came in because there was dairy. Now that doesn't apply to the outer coast where we have some native wetland habitat and you have swans, but very few swans can be supported by our native wetlands. Before we came and altered the bay, it did support quite a number of trumpeter and tundra swans, but that's all basically gone and now they're dairy dependent. So basically about 85% of our swans in Western and Eastern Washington, well, I would say Western Washington, are dairy dependent. So it's the corn that brings them in after harvest. One of the things that we're finding both with corn and with potatoes is that the more efficient the harvesters get, the fewer there is waste crop left in the fields. So corn, back in 1970 something, I was just recently talking to a retired dairy farmer up in the Skagit, and we were just having a great conversation. And he said, you know, back in the early 70s, we had a corn that did not make kernels. It was a variety that just did not mature because it was a variety that needed a longer growing season than you have here. And a few of the dairy farmers discovered a variety out of Germany, and they brought it in, and because Germany is the same latitude, and it created kernels. And the cows loved it. Cows thrived on it. And I just sat there going, and so did the swans. Because as I look back on the data that we have from the 60s, the early 70s, it clearly shows trumpeter swans started really coming back into the Skagit when the corn changed to be a food resource for them. And the other one is potatoes. Lots of potatoes are grown in the Skagit now. And a lot of them are left in the fields or harvested and then put back out. So you can find muddy swans everywhere, including down here on the lower right. So potatoes are a really important source. And it used to be that the swans would only go into the potatoes after the first freeze, when the potatoes became softer. Now, with the advent of so many potatoes, the swans are actually taking these potatoes when they're kind of in their crunchy state, if you will, and you can really watch them crunch down on these things and shred them so that they will be able to eat them, which is a new thing in the last, I would say, decade. and of course, natural wetlands, which Barney Lake is one of those. A really, swans would prefer to have natural wetlands, of course. Their feeding strategy is tip up like a dabbling duck or put your head and neck down into feeding off the aquatic vegetation. They can reach down 3 feet with those long necks. And I love the photograph on the bottom simply because, oops, I have had a number of people report to me that there's a dead swan out on some wetland, and I get out there and the swans are doing fine. The people just saw them when they were feeding. So I always tell you, if you think a swan is dead, sit there for 2 minutes. If its head and neck come up, you're good. If it doesn't, give me a call. So it's really kind of great. So one of the places that we really started working with in the early years of all of this was what has become now known as the Johnson DeBay Swan Reserve. It was a dairy. It was the DeBay family dairy out here. They had their farm, and this was the land that they all had to grow the corn and the other crops for their dairy cattle. Back in the late 90s, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, working with us and many other partners, were able to secure grants and buy most of the land, and it became, this is the outline of it here, the reserve, the Johnson DeBay Swan Reserve, and the outline in blue is also owned by the department, but that is the hunt unit. It is open to hunting. If you look at the aerial photo, this big field here on the bottom of the photo is the hunt unit, and the rest of it is the Swan Reserve. It works very well doing that. The slough is a huge night roost for swans all through up here, and it's mostly on this south end that they use. A few swans will go into the upper, but not many, and it borders on the river, so it performs several functions. One, the swans and other waterfowl get a lot of crops grown for them. This is a great riparian corridor for the river, which is really important for me as well. I really wanted that corridor. And we saved a huge night roost. Turns out that this area is not suitable for salmon. And so plans for that have been scrapped, hopefully permanently. There are still some plans by the department to open up the reserve to hunting, and we are actively engaged in keeping the reserve for wildlife and not for additional hunting. And here's where it kind of all began for me and probably others, Skagit Valley and Barney Lake. So this is Barney Lake here. And I went back into the files and I started, and my first encounter with swans was really at Barney Lake. And a lot of swans roosted there. When I say a lot, we're talking in 1968, 46 trumpeter swans were in the Skagit Bay area. Okay. By 1978, there were about 150 trumpeter swans. So in this, and so I was just kind of picking up sick, dead, and dying swans off Barney. It was about the only night roost in the area. Heavily used because they had 2 major dairy farms and other dairy farms that they fed on. And everything was going along just great. And in this mid-spring of 1980, 275 to 300 trumpeters were using the lake. However, hundreds of people came to take photographs, disturbing the birds on a constant basis all day long. And 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 times an hour, the birds would be disturbed off the fields, people going into the wetlands as well. In the fall of 1980, the use of Barney Lake was 0. Not a swan to be found. The impacts from birders and photographers was revealing. It took about 4 years and some effort by many of us to start to look at conserving Barney Lake, restricting access, that kind of thing. But by 1986, we had 469 swans back on the lake, and that was really good because that was kind of what the population in the Skagit was. And then from there, things began to really grow. And here we are today with numbers in the over 10,000 swans are coming into Western Washington, a lot of them in the Skagit Valley. Although crops have changed, market forces have changed, dairy farms are leaving, it's hard to know what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. But you never know what you're going to find when you're out there looking around. And these are pictures of swans from the Skagit, one in Whatcom. And this is what's out there at this point in time. We know we have another 4 deformities that are out there in the Skagit again this year. 1 is new, 3 are likely repeats. But the one on the lower right was taken about 4 years ago. And this is a juvenile trumpeter swan in the early part of the season. And that is a deformity that is pretty spectacular. That swan flew from Alaska to the Skagit Valley. I'm surprised it made it. It was around all winter long. And the next year, this is what we also found, the one on the lower left. And this deformity appears to be this deformity. We think this is the same bird. We have now seen it, this is year 4, and it's still out there going strong. And we've seen some other deformities. So we have what we call the swoop neckers, meaning kind of a swoop in the neck. And we have the bent neckers. They have an actual deformity of the vertebrae. I have actually seen a vertebrae with this deformity on a dead swan, and it is actually a deformed vertebrae. These are not injuries. And they happen in tundra swans as well. Here's another juvenile trumpeter. They seem to do okay with these kinds of injuries. It's really just an interesting anomaly. But they're out there, and I've got numbers of people sending me photos. If you happen to have a photo of one of them, I would appreciate getting it. We're kind of have a gallery going. It's really kind of cool. So when I was talking about swans are where, when, coming through the pass, not just in the spring and fall migration, I've always believed that we have had this exchange between the RMP and the PCP populations. And in the Skagit zone, it would be Highway 20. And probably in the early 2000s, we did see 12 trumpeter swans flying east to west in the spring and landing on Diablo Lake and then Ross Lake. And then a couple of days later, they went back over the pass and disappeared. And we're all kind of thinking, well, Grandy Lake, Ross Lake, these are not part of the PCP. These are part of the RMP groupies because they come over the pass. And there's the Okanagan, which has a migration that goes through there. And I've always felt like they came through I-90, but it's hard to prove. We know we have trumpeter swans in the Cle Elum area on those ponds that are up at the higher elevations. And then about 3 years ago, a photographer was driving from the east side to the west side and saw all these trumpeter swans flying near Hyak Pass in a snowstorm on December 6th. And he got out and took a picture. And here we are, and here are the ski lifts in the background. And that is so not something we really associate with our trumpeter swans. But since then, we have realized how many trumpeters are making this journey, that we just don't really know how many, but it's a regular occurrence. So the banded swans, satellite transmitters are now, well, they put them on 19 trumpeter swans in the Skagit Valley 2 years ago with a graduate student project. These are the collars are white, have no numbers on them, which is unfortunate for me. And they have the solar panel. And here's the swan wearing it with a metal leg band. They banded adult females, so that they would not get pairs and birds that knew the routes. And they wanted to know where they're breeding, where they go, but also their movements within the Skagit Valley within the year, because here they're feeding on potatoes. I helped with the catching and banding of the swans, which was really interesting because I knew it was hard to do with trumpeters in the winter, and it proved to be every bit a challenge. So here is the full life cycle migration tracks of some of the swans. We know that some of the swans are dead, probably 3. We don't know about a few others because they could be still off the grid. These are callers that depend on cell towers for communication. But we still have, as of last fall, 13 working callers. So that's pretty good. They go all the way out here. Here's the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, but here's an area where trumpeters do breed, and up in here as well. And then some of them short-stopped. And the reason we know they went all the way out here, even though there's no cell towers here, is they collect data even though they're not within tower range. But once they come back onto the grid, they download where they've been. So some of them actually short-stopped and didn't go any further than like right here. They stayed in basically British Columbia the whole summer. A couple of them stayed up in the Yukon, but others went all the way up into Alaska. And then that thing is unfortunately at the bottom, showing a little bit of, I'll show it here, which is better. So here's Washington. And so the fall when they came back down, most of them came back down on the west side and stayed on the west side, as you can see. But 2 got frisky and creative, and they went for some reason to the east side of Washington, and they traveled around the pink and then the darker pink. But they both came back into Western Washington within a few days. And one went back up to the Skagit, but the other one wintered down along the Columbia River in the flocks down there where a lot of tundra swans are and refuges. This past year, this particular darker pink one went back to the Skagit. But we have another swan that has been going out to swim. And this year that bird came down to swim, stayed for 1 hour, and then went back up into BC. And about 2 weeks later came back to swim, has been to the Skagit, and now is back at swim. So we know that our swans move around. So it's just interesting to finally have proof on the ground of how some of them really do travel around, including back over into Eastern Washington. I just put this in because I thought it was really interesting. Swans have 25 vertebrae, and so they can do whatever they want to preen all of these tens of thousands of feathers that they have. So, and I just thought it was just a great photo done by Kim Cashon, a volunteer with us. And then here, just reaching down and having these great photo moments that people catch. And they put their feet out like this as solar panels to keep warm. So now we're going to transition from swans to the other white bird, our geese, snow geese. So the populations of our lesser snow geese, but let's just go down to the bottom here onto the right side. The greater snow goose is an East Coast only snow goose. They are larger than the lesser snow goose. They breed up in the Arctic, but they only winter along the East Coast. In our lesser snow geese, we have basically three populations. Two of them have an influence in Washington, Wrangel Island and the Western Arctic. We do not have the mid-continent snow geese here. They're managed with the Central Flyway. For those people who are interested in hunting or know about the rules and regs of the hunt, the mid-continent population grew to astronomical numbers, and the wintering grounds were the reason because they were unlimited, and they were destroying the Arctic habitat moving back. So they put in a conservation covenant into their Central Flyways management plan. And they have a spring hunt where you basically, after the season, when the birds are beginning to migrate back north, you unplug your shotgun and basically shoot as many as you want. We do not have that here. It works for the mid-continent, but let me just say the mid-continent snow goose population has declined in a more substantial way, but they still have a spring hunt, but it's more under control than it used to be. The Western Arctic population of snow geese basically breeds on the north slope of Alaska and all through this Western Arctic, northwestern Arctic area up here. And they winter down mostly into California, a little bit down into Arizona, Nevada, Utah, but a lot of it is in Chico, California, where 1 million snow geese are wintering down there or have been. And then we have the Wrangel Island population, which is basically 100% of the Skagit Valley snow geese are from Wrangel Island. And they breed way up here and they winter down here, and I'll show you that right now. Well, not quite yet, but you'll see. So we have two kinds of lesser snow geese, color morphs, the white and the blue phase. Probably most of you know that. The blue phase is just a darker phase. We didn't used to have that here, but we do now. It's come into the population and more of them are being found all the time. White head, dark blue body, but both color phases have the black wingtips that all snow geese have, and they have the same color bill, same color feet. So the adult and juvenile white morph, here's the adult, all white, iron staining on the face, sometimes iron staining on the neck, because they do feed a lot in the iron-rich soils. The juveniles are gray. They have kind of a black bill, black feet. Again, iron staining. But over here on the lower right, we have the blue phase juvenile next to a white phase juvenile. So our geese are coming from Wrangel Island. It's north of Siberia in the Chukchi Sea. And they winter down here in the Fraser, Skagit Delta areas of Canada, the US, Sauvie Island, Chillipu area, Oregon, Washington, mostly in the Central Valley, and in Boardman, Oregon, and Moses Lake. That is new in the last decade, for sure. We'll talk about that one in a moment. So Wrangel Island is way up here in the white circle, and you'll see the major flight paths. The yellow goes all the way over to Alberta and then comes back in mostly to Chico, California. The gold goes almost over there, but it goes east of the mountains, and then it comes back into the Skagit. And the orange is direct route to the Skagit. And then some of these birds come down into Chico. And now we have eastern Washington. So the lower Columbia River, the Willamette Valley, Sacramento Valley, Columbia Basin, are now the main areas where we have the Wrangel Island snow geese. You also have the Western Arctic snow geese down here and a small number of Western Arctics in eastern Washington. So the snow geese start out far to the north on Wrangel Island, north of Siberia and the Chukchi Sea. This is what Wrangel Island looks like in the summer. Downy nests, they nest on the ground. Their predators are primarily Arctic fox and a few wolves, but mostly it's the Arctic fox and some of the Jaegers and other birds. So here's Wrangel Island and how it kind of lies. Here's Russia down here to the south of it. And these yellow lines here is the transmitters that are on snow geese. And it shows where they go to breed here. And you'll see this big empty zone here where the geese don't even fly. And that's because the polar bear area is on Wrangel. It's a major breeding area for the region of the Beaufort Sea. And if you land here and you're a snow goose, you're lunch. You don't get a second chance. So they don't want to breed here. They don't really much fly even over this stuff. So it's really just interesting to see how much of Wrangel is used by the snow geese and how much is affected by other predators. So in the Fraser Skagit, you have the Fraser, and then 100 miles apart, kilometers, you have us. And this movement can occur on a daily basis. A lot of our snow geese can be up in the Fraser one day, back with us the next day, or a mixture of both. But that is, we're the same grouping in terms of management and in terms of counting them, because the movement is happening all the time. So what's the status of our snow geese? Back in the early years, when I first started in the 70s, there were hardly any snow geese, and they were really minimally hunted, if anything. The Russians were doing a lot of work with them, and the population began to build and build and build. And by 2022, 23, we had 138,000 snow geese in the Skagit. In 1 year, and I can't remember, it's probably been about 4 years ago, 450,000 snow geese went back to Wrangel to breed, and almost 1 million snow geese came off the island. It was a 52% juvenile ratio that year. And some of you would probably remember seeing that many juveniles in the flocks. And the population began to really grow in the Skagit. It went from 109,000 to 138,000, and everybody was going to get, are we going to go to like 200,000? Can we support them in the Skagit? What's going to happen? Well, 2022, 23, 138,000. The next year it was 90,000. The next year it was 71,000. And I was getting calls that said, where are the snow geese? Are they in trouble? Are they dying? Nope. If you look at eastern Washington, 2022, 153,000. So, but in 2015, 16, only about 20,000 were there. Now, there's between 130 to 180,000 snow geese in eastern Washington. And it's growing. Our geese from Wrangel Island have simply moved to the eastern Washington side for a reason. The habitat is diminishing in the Skagit for waterfowl-friendly farming. The dairy industry has been hit hard with all these environmental regulations and some years of vilification and other market forces as well. And they moved to eastern Washington, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Sauvie Island, Ridgefield, they went from 38,000 to less than 20,000 2 years later. one of the factors that's driving some of the decline in our Western population, because we are wrangle dependent. All of our birds are wrangle. On the east side, it's about 85 to 90% wrangle at times. But avian flu came in 2022, 25, and 26, killing thousands of snow geese, mostly juveniles. And the thing about the cycle of our geese, especially the Wrangell Island geese, is they don't breed till they're 3. And so if you kill the juveniles, it's going to take 3 years to rebuild your population of breeding population. And we've been hit hard for these 3 years. So the recruitment into adulthood has been highly compromised. And that's why we see some of these plunging numbers of the Wrangell Island population. In the 2025 spring arrival at Wrangell Island, that's last year, 14% fewer geese than in 2024. So we know that we're losing our geese because, again, recruitment isn't happening because of the avian influenza. So if we go to Eastern Washington and Oregon, because it's really helpful to understand what's happened to our snow geese. So down here at the bottom is a big red dot. This is Boardman, Oregon. Well, when we in Western Washington decided that dairy farms would go, and the dairy farmers moved for economic reasons. A big one went in here at Boardman, a 70,000 cow dairy. Yep, 70,000. And if you look at the Google Maps, you'll notice that there's a lot of little crop circles all over here. But also they had a beef cattle feeding operation here. And they had two lakes, one here, and no hunting. And the snow geese not only moved up from Summer Lake in Oregon, but they short stopped and became a different migration path. You have the same thing happening in Kennewick Richland. You have the Columbia National Wildlife Refuge, and then the dairy industry. So here is a close-up view of the Kennewick area here on the left, and it shows the dairy farms. And this is a blow-up of it, and you see all these green crop circles. It's all, a lot of it is dairy, crops for dairies. And the geese love it. And you have the Columbia Refuge. So snow geese moved in response to the agricultural shifts, and they're continuing that pattern today. So we've gone, we can still see some of this dairy farm here in Skagit and this, but it's not like it used to be. And it's kind of a good thing because a lot of these waterfowl friendly crops are gone. And so we have other tools that have had to come in to help farmers to keep crop depredation down by snow geese. So snow goose hunting. So there's a normal snow goose hunt in the Skagit area, as there is in Eastern Washington. Skagit and Snohomish are kind of linked together. And last season, 10 snow geese was the daily bag limit. It's now 6 for this last season. And there is an extended hunt. So they close part of the normal hunt days and they put them into February. I think we're in the extended hunt period now. And it's 12 days in February. One other day is for youth and veterans. But these 12 days are for white goose only. And it's to keep the geese moving around on the farmland so that no one farmer takes a big hit from hopefully the snow geese. And in the Columbia Basin, the bag limits and the days that you hunt are quite different because snow geese don't migrate as early in the Columbia Basin as they do here. So that's kind of a synopsis of it. If you want to know more information, just get a hold of a Department of Fish and Wildlife small game pamphlet, and it will give you a lot more information about what's going on with the management of this. In Snohomish County, keep in mind, this goose management is only done in certain parts of Skagit and Snohomish in particular, so that the geese, you can't hunt geese on wildlife areas, you can't hunt them on hunt clubs. It's really only in the farmlands that they have the hunting, because they are really interested in, the purpose of it is to keep the geese moving around off the farmland. So what's going on here is loss of waterfowl-friendly farming. Market forces, both local and global, have caused the dairies to close or move to eastern Washington. And there is a shift in types of crops farmed. Golly, last year we had Brussels sprouts. And before that, it was other things. And there's a lot of seed crop grown in the Skagit, which is great. But the dairy farm corn is going away. And the sad truth is that the last dairy closed over in Squim, and now there is no corn in Squim. And it appears that this year, with all the surveys they've been doing over there are fewer swans because it's a lower carrying capacity. Increased environmental and other regulations are affecting farming and waterfowl-friendly farming. Salmon habitat restoration, competing conflict for waterfowl habitat, crop types planted to shift to higher value crops to deter losses from snow geese. And these are non-waterfowl friendly: hazelnut trees, mustard, fava beans, Brussels sprouts, and more. And then you have the great potato glut, which the swans really appreciate. So wintering habitat loss, as we go from dairy farms here with swans here and here. This is potatoes. Harvesting techniques are now better, so smaller potatoes are not left in the field as much. Corn to dairy to berry. And this is what we've seen for thousands of acres in Whatcom, Skagit, Snohomish, and nursery trees as well. Hothouses in British Columbia for tomatoes have come in a lot of acreage. And here is Cascade Mall area, and this wetland no longer exists. It's kind of where Kmart is now. So we're losing a lot of resources everywhere. And yet Skagit Land Trust, Skagit Audubon, and others are fighting hard to keep that in check. And the city of Burlington has done some good work with land management, thanks to the Skagitonians to Preserve Farmland, and a whole lot of other people up there are working really, really hard. So waterfowl enthusiasts need to be waterfowl habitat enthusiasts. The table that supports the spectacle of waterfowl has 4 legs. Sustainable ecosystem, economically and environmentally, is the tabletop. 1 leg is wildlife, waterfowl, snow geese, swans, raptors, shorebirds, and other species. Another leg is the hunters, the dollars to support farmers, keep crop damage less, waterfowl conservation. And then you have the conservation community, or the non-hunt community, to helping conserve, protect farmland, waterfowl conservation, wetlands, and more. And you have the agricultural community, needed or wildlife-friendly crops, dairy farms, economic viability for farmers, and ecotourism, bird watchers and other visitors of all kinds that bring in a lot of money into the community. Because keep in mind that ecotourism is the huge driver in the Skagit Valley. And then we want to talk about birding with awareness. But in the Skagit, you have Be Birdwise, a wonderful program started by the farmers to help people understand farmland is private property, not public property, and that there should be rules. One of them is don't trespass. So here are just some interesting pictures from people behaving not so great when the snow geese are out and about. And the lower one, it was just like, this is egregious behavior. They even brought their dog. And there's a follow-up photograph to this that I didn't include. And somebody was standing over here in the barns taking a picture from the other direction. And the geese, the swans and the geese were like, excuse me, but who are all these people coming in? So stay on the roads and use your car as a blind. But sometimes the geese come to you and you can take advantage of that. This last year, I was out on Beaver Marsh Road and there was a family of swans on the side of the road, like it would be like 10 feet off the road. So I stopped the car at a distance and I kind of rolled down the window to take some pictures and they kept feeding. And then as I was slowly driving by, they walked over to my car and I stopped. And they just started looking at my car at about 3 feet away. And I was just like, dudes, this is really not becoming behavior. So sometimes the birds can behave badly too. So be birdwise. You can check out their website, bebirdwise.org. Lots of good resource information for how to help you to be a better birder and to help your fellow citizens to be better birders when they come into the Skagit Valley, because it's really important for people to understand the relationship between farming and birds. So what problems are going on with swans, along with other birds in the area, especially waterfowl? High pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI, is now affecting many species. Snow geese being hit hard again. Swans and cackling Canada geese. But swans have been hit a bit this year, but not as bad as last year. So we're kind of hopeful. The Department of Fish and Wildlife continues to ask, if you find sick or dead birds, do not touch them. Report them immediately, and I repeat, do not touch them. You can use the WDFW online reporting. Just type in WDFW to your search engine, online avian influenza reporting, and you can report that way, or you can call down here in the lower left corner, the Swan hotline. I have another slide with that phone number on it. The Swan hotline is monitored every day, and Daniel Zimmerman does a great job of monitoring that. And he picks up the sick, dead, and dying in Whatcom and Skagit, and a bit in North Snohomish, and then I kind of handle South Snohomish. Partnerships with power. So a lot of you have seen the little firefly diverters hanging on all the power lines. Puget Sound Energy has been great over the decades to mark the power lines so that we don't have the kind of thing you see here on the left. Swans do fly below the lines or through the lines at times. Curlicues are another thing to help the birds see the markers. It has reduced substantially the number of collisions that swans or geese make with our power lines. And lead poisoning is still ongoing. It's not as bad as it was in the early 2000s and into the between 1999 and 2015. It was really quite bad. Major die-offs in some of those years, especially up in Whatcom County, and then down in Snohomish King in 2015 and 2019. This is kind of what it looks like, me and my boat and picking up the sick, dead, and dying. And here's Mike Smith. Some of you may know him from the department. So stop using lead fishing sinkers and lead ammunition for all your shooting needs. Here's the Swan hotline, because we do want to pick up all the swan carcasses, especially if they've died of lead poisoning, because we don't want secondary poisoning in our raptors. So 360-466-0515. So if we all get together and we work hard, we can continue to have swans gracing our skies and our ag lands and ponds for hopefully a long time to come. And the snow geese. So, any questions?
Martha, you had so much amazing information in there. So it'll probably take a minute for people to kind of figure out what they didn't know. So I'll give people a minute. I have a couple of questions that
So
I can
people,
ask you.
so if you're looking at this photograph of the cygnet, this is one of the cygnets that I reared in my backyard that was part of the Foster to Freedom program that I I took cygnets from Northwest Trek and either raised them here or had them here for a week or two and then sent them to Iowa. So these little tiny feathers on either side is where the ears are. It's not something most people see when they look at baby ducks or baby swans. And it was kind of interesting to see ears uh, shown with these little tufts coming out.
Yeah,
So I can switch over, stop sharing,
yeah,
and we
that
can
would
go.
be great.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
we've got a first question here from Darren Lord. He says, "That was awesome. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about how you color the swans?"
Well, there's several methods. Of course, one is in Alaska when they're molting and you can run them down with an airboat or a float plane. I have done the float plane thing in Alaska. That's kind of exciting. Let's just put it that way. And but here in the Skagit where they can fly, they have used rocket nets primarily. They have attempted a use with the net gun, which looks like a giant gun that has a net that it throws out. That works for geese really well, but swans are pretty much their wingspan is as wide as the net. So while we tried it in the Skagit, it didn't really work very well. So rocket nets are the biggest thing, and that's where you have a really long net that you put in the field, and it has rocket explosive devices along it, and you put bait in front of it, and then when enough birds come in and are on the bait, you set off the rocket and it goes out and captures the birds. And then you run like heck and catch as many birds from under the net as you can and put them in crates or swaddling or whatever your mechanism is. And then you do the banding from there. In the early years, before we had the satellite transmitters and all of that, we used color coated plastic bands. During the big swan die-off in the Whatcom area, we did put radio transmitters on 240 some birds. And we were hoping that by tracking the birds 24/7, we would be able to find out if some of them died where the lead was coming from. Unfortunately, only 2 collared birds died. So other birds died, hundreds of them, but only 2 of the collared birds did. But that's how you ban the birds. And now they've gone to, rather than these numbered letters, numbers, there's still a few out there. I saw one this year, K58. That is a rehab bird that was released, but there's also a couple of tundra swans still out there with collars that I've seen from many, many years ago. They've gone away from just the plastic collar to the GPS collars or the satellite transmitters. So we don't have to actually report the sighting. The birds, the researchers get pings every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, depends on what your settings have been. And then the researchers download the data. It isn't as much fun to be out there birding and try to find the collars like it used to be. But I understand why we want to go to that mechanism, and they put white on so that they're kind of not detectable out in the environment, because you never know where the swans are going to end up, especially the snow geese. They put white on. So
Thank you, Martha. Darren also wondered, do their partners stick around kind of waiting during the process, or they fly away totally out of sight, or
they can fly away. What we seem to have found is that they do find each other again. in the Skagit within a day or two. They go to the same night roost. They, they know their calls. Typically, when you do the rocket netting, you've caught a whole family, or you catch the pairs together. So it's not as big a problem as it would be, say, in something else.
Great. We have another question from Pat. Does the government still subsidize winter corn and barley plantings specifically for the birds?
No, and they haven't for decades. The corn plantings were never subsidized. The Barley for Birds program has not been in existence for a really long time. I I want to say 20 years. Uh, Funding mechanisms have changed. Uh, Needs have changed. There's even issues now with the Hayden Snow Goose Reserve. Controversy, how to make it better. And there are internal discussions happening about how to make that happen. Some people may balk at it. I personally, after looking at what their proposal is, that still hasn't come to the light yet. I think they have a plan that will work, because when you start planting the crops, what they're planting now for snow geese is more of the pasture grass to get it to get the birds off the farmlands. And Hayden Reserve has some issues with early snow geese. So there's a lot of complexity to all this, but there is no subsidizing farmers other than now they're subsidizing. There is the Quality Hunt program where they pay farmers to allow the public to hunt on their property. So you can sign up for a blind on X farm, and you alone will have that blind and that farm for that day. But outside of that, there's no plantings. It's all just what the farms are able to support. But we have a new hunt club, a hunting, I won't call it a club, it's not really that, it's a business. It's a hunting business that's come into an old dairy farm down in the Conway kind of area. And they are planting a lot of crops for ducks and waterfowl. And how is that going to shift the distribution of birds in the valley is still kind of unknown, since they just started up in the last year. So I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns. And then you have all the salmon restoration that has happened. You have more wetland restoration happening on the Skagit Wildlife Area for waterfowl that you don't hear much about, because we have to remove a lot of cattails. So jury's still out.
Thank you. We have another question from Deb and Dan. How have you heard about Ralph Edwards, who saved trumpeter swans at Lonesome Lake, BC long ago?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
This person, they had heard that his efforts saved the swans so that we have them today. So he
Well,
must have been an important
here's
figure.
a little known fact. So Ralph Edwards did in fact do a really good thing. And the population of swans that he was working with was the Rocky Mountain population. He was not in the PCP because of where he was located. So yeah, I actually have a book, the book by him. I actually got to meet his daughter, and to learn more. And I've been there way back when, and it's good. I mean, he did a really incredible good thing, but it wasn't the Pacific Coast population. It was the RMP, and his work really did make a difference.
Very interesting. Folks, we have a little more time, so if you have more questions, just toss them into the chat directly to me. Um, Here's another question. Johnson de Bay, why wasn't it suitable for salmon? And is there a better viewing area that you'd recommend apart from the pond near the entrance?
The only place that you can view the Johnson Bay is from that parking area. We're trying to work on having an undeveloped trail during the summer months. There was an attempt by some people, including Skagit Audubon, to have a birding trail there, but the logistics and the maintenance to keep it open were beyond what anybody could do. So basically, it's what it is today. We'd hoped to have a viewing tower there, but funding just never came. And we're still working on it. Right now, my biggest issue is we want to make sure the department does not take it out of reserve status, because then it would be open to hunting. And there is a significant pressure to do that. But we also need habitat for a lot of birds that use the area, not just the swans. And we need places for birders to go, for the non-hunting public. So the answer about what was the other one was
Well, he asked why wasn't it suitable for salmon, and
suitable
then
for salmon, because the Bay Slough is not open to the river, so the water is warm, and it's too warm for salmon to survive. It's not good. It's not good salmon habitat for breeding habitat for salmon, or even for they can't survive most of the year there because the water is just too warm. And they looked at opening, one of the plans was to open the slough to the river. And what they discovered when they finally did a real survey and a real serious project to look at this, they discovered that the way the river moves, so it comes down here and then it makes a bend up toward the north again, and the slough comes in about right here, and they're not connected. If they connect this, it will be a straight shot in a flood that will take out the valley. So they all decided that that was a really bad idea. And it would destroy the salmon if any were in there, but it would also take out the valley, and the flood risk would be astronomical. So that was the decision that was made, to not consider it salmon habitat, but also the flood risk was exceedingly high.
crisis averted. Thank goodness. We've talked a lot about the different problems that swans are facing and have faced with habitat loss, lead poisoning, avian influenza. Um, but there are some signs of hope for the future of swans and snow geese, I would say. Would you agree? This is my question. And also maybe where should we focus our efforts to ensure their long-term survival? Conservation organizations certainly play a role. Is there more they can do? Is there more that the public can do? What should be the focus for?
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that I've learned over the decades is that swans are an ambassador species. They bring both sides together. It's hard to hate a swan. There are those that do, but it's hard to hate a swan. And because they're not hunted here, uh, there isn't the controversy like snow geese. And so you have an opportunity to create awareness about agriculture and waterfowl, and understanding how that four-legged table really works, and how in the Skagit this is really important. It's also getting to be important around places like Othello, Yakima, where we have a lot more snow geese, a lot of other things going on, and an increasing population, and a lot of migration that happens over there that doesn't really happen here. But in the Skagit, it's really about how do we keep waterfowl friendly farming, and how do you envision that in the Skagit? And that, some of it you can control, some of the salmon issues and salmon restoration, you need to really take a look at how do we have salmon and waterfowl, not just salmon. And we've got a good project happening in Snohomish County because I really rose up along with some other people and said the Confluence project just outside of Monroe in Snohomish, the first iteration of it was disastrous for waterfowl. And I said no, and I really pushed it hard. And it sounded like I was anti-salmon, but I wasn't. And several years later, they've come back with a new project. It has some flaws, but it's way better. And we have waterfowl habitat and salmon and the diking issues that are going to be addressed and the flooding issues. It's all been kind of pulled together. And that's what I'm talking about. So swans can be that gateway species to help people to look outside the box and to recognize that it isn't all about one or the other because we're not enemies. But we really, and we have the Bolt decision in this state. And the Bolt decision changed everything. And so some projects for salmon are really incredible, and others have been absolute disasters. And that's true of a lot of different projects out in the world. And then you have the Skagit Land Trust, which really helps. And getting Barney Lake was a dream that we all had back in the day. We ended up realizing the Bell property had to be, fixed. We did what we could with the dairy farms, and then it just fell off the radar screen for a number of years. And then it came back because of Skagit Audubon and Skagit Land Trust. And, the rest is history, as I say. And I sort of stepped back from that because by that time, there was a way bigger issue that no one was addressing on the Long Beach Peninsula called Hines Marsh, the largest interdunal wetland left pretty much in the United States. And it was swan habitat at one time, and it was habitat for a lot of other species. And so I ended up down there working with that, and there were some other projects around the state as well. So I realized that Barney Lake was in good hands. And the Debay Reserve was in good hands for a while, and now we have this controversy coming up where those of us that can focus more narrowly at times, we have to keep the reserve the reserve. And that isn't as easy as it seems because you have to kind of know how to work in the system so that it's just not as overt. And, and people are doing so many good things, and there's so many projects out there. So, it just trying to keep some core places out there is really key, like the Bay, like Barney Lake. And the swans are coming back into Barney Lake, and because the dairy farms are kind of gone, but photographers are a little better because of the private nature of what you've done at Barney Lake. It keeps a lot of people out. And so
Well, speaking of that, Martha, I should
oh
probably
yeah, we're running kind of late. So
start to wrap up, but I wanted to mention to folks that we do take community members out to Barney Lake to view the swans mindfully and respectfully. And I actually asked Martha about this when we were on the phone yesterday. I hope we aren't disturbing the swans, and she said, "Oh no, the way you guys do it is great." So we take people out at certain times of the morning or evening, and we kind of use the uh, trees along the water line as a blind, and take small groups and ask people to keep quiet. And we haven't noticed any disturbances with the swans, but it's important. And these swan events are great opportunities to be able to see the swans at closer range and watch them take off and land. Um, and so those events fill up really fast. Some of you might have even been, waitlisted to try to get into them. And we do have a few of the morning events that don't have a long wait list at all right now. So if you want to go to our website and hop on to the wait list, it's worth a try. For some of the morning ones, the afternoon ones are pretty full. We are opening another afternoon one probably to help meet demand. But I wanted to mention a few upcoming events. Uh, on March 12th, we'll be having our next speaker series talk on wildfire and emergency management. And that's with a panel with Rocio from Puget Sound Energy and Robert Walters from Whatcom Conservation District, who's a wildfire technician, and they'll be able to share a professional perspective on wildfire prevention and management. So you can keep an eye on our e-news or our social media or our website for more information about that one, which is about ready to post pretty soon here. March 19th, we'll have our annual meeting. It's going to be at the Mount Vernon Library this year. And I wanted to mention that if you're not already a Skagit Land Trust member, you can become one pretty easily. You just have to make a donation or volunteer your time. And on that note, we have some volunteer opportunities coming up. We have work parties right at Barney Lake on February 16th. There's a morning shift and an afternoon shift. There's another work party at Day Creek on March 13th and one on Samish Island on March 21st. We also, if you're interested in youth education, youth nature education, we have our Utopia field trips coming up, and my colleague Stacy Dahl is always looking for good volunteers for that. So I will put some links in the chat for people who aren't familiar with us to find our social media and things like that. I just want to close that by saying thank you so much for joining us. Special thanks to Martha, but also to all of our members, our volunteers, our community partners, the landowners who we've worked with for helping to save land for all generations of people and wildlife. And so with that, I'm going to just stop sharing my screen and put a few links in the chat. And again, I'm sure that people had, many more questions that they wanted to ask, but there will be other opportunities, I'm sure, down the line. And we are really glad that Martha was able to give us so much of her time. And I know, Martha, you now have to kind of get out the door to go rescue that swan that was called about, probably. So,
And one last comment. I just got word they caught the swan.
oh, all
So
right.
I'm now off to collect a trumpeter swan.
All right. Well,
Thanks
that's
to
very
all
much
the
on
people
brand.
out there that make the world a great place. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you all. See you next time, we hope. All right.